afternoon and happy Therapy Book Thursday to everyone. Today I'm going to be reading Ida, Always by Caron Levis and Charles Santoso. So this book today is about grief and loss, and it walks through the path, the story of two polar bears and their life together before, during, and after the loss of Ida. So let's go ahead and read this, and we'll talk a little bit more about the story afterwards. So, Ida, Always. Gus lived in a big park in the middle of an even bigger city. Buildings grew around him and shifted the shape of the sky. Zookeepers poked in and out. Visitors came and went. But every morning, when keys clicked and shoes clacked, Gus crawled out of his cave and spent his day with Ida. Ida was right there, always. When Gus tossed the ball, Ida was there to catch it. When Gus splashed water, Ida was there to splash him right back. They chased and raced until school bells rang. Then the two friends flopped onto their favorite rock while the city pulsed around them. "I wish we could see it," Gus sighed. "You don't have to see it to feel it," said Ida. "Listen." They heard buses groan, trucks rumble, police whistle, taxis honk, pigeons coo, people say, "Hey, wait, yo, hello," and children laugh. "That's the city's heartbeat," said Ida. "It's right here with us, always." When the sky grew dark, Gus and Ida waved goodnight and crawled off to their caves. With the subways humming underground, they added their snores to the sounds of their city. Every day was always the same. Until one morning, when keys clicked and shoes clacked, Gus crawled out. But Ida wasn't there. Gus lumbered to Ida's cave. He heard her breathing, coughing, snoring, sleeping. He sat in their sunniest spot and waited. The coffee carts ground their beans and the squirrels squabbled over crumbs. Visitors shuffled in, keepers bustled out. Ida had never slept so late. Snow monkeys and taxi cabs screeched, ice cream trucks jingled. Still, Ida didn't come. Keeper Sonia came instead. Sonia told Gus that Ida was very sick. Usually there's a way to make a sick bear better, but this time was different. Ida wouldn't hurt, but she would get tired and too weak to swim and play. Then one day, when her body stopped working, Ida would die. Sonia's voice was soft. But the words felt rough to Gus. His insides churned, his chin shook, the sky rumbled. Gus rushed to his friend. "Don't go," he growled. "Don't go, don't go, don't." Ida growled right back. Together they stomped and snarled. Their growls turned into howls, so loud they filled up the zoo, rising higher than skyscrapers, scaring pigeons, surging toward stars. And then they stopped. The two friends folded into one shadow and slumped quietly on the rocks. Two bare noses sniffled, two bare breaths panted, two bare hearts echoed each other's beat. A plane roared overhead. Gus and Ida wondered where it was going. They wondered where Ida was going too. They wondered and guessed and imagined as they whispered nose to nose. "Wherever I go," said Ida, "I bet I'll always smell your fishy breath." That made Gus smile. He wasn't sure if he should, but Ida was giggling too. They let their laughs bounce back and forth between them. From then on, Ida spent most days in her cave. She slept a lot, but she didn't hurt. The keepers took good care of her. And Gus helped. He gathered her favorite toys and fishy treats. He brought her visitors notes. There were growling days and laughing days and days that mixed them up. Sometimes Ida needed a moment alone, and sometimes Gus did too. But at the end of the day, Gus always told Ida, "I'll miss you." And Ida always told Gus, "I'll miss you too." They would cuddle until the sky grew dark and the lamps of the city clicked on. They would wave goodnight 1,000 times, then wave a few times more. Then one sunny day, while Gus smoothed her fur, Ida curled into quiet. Her eyes fluttered shut, and they didn't open anymore. Gus pressed one last pat into Ida's paw. The papers shared the news. The city cried. For days, the zoo was filled with goodbyes. Now, when keys click and shoes clack, Gus crawls out of his cave, knowing Ida won't be there. He dives and swims alone, and he eats his lunch with Sonia. They roll Ida's favorite yellow ball. Some days Gus forgets. He looks for Ida on the rocks in her cave, behind the waterfall. When he remembers she isn't there, he rests in the shadows. But even in the shadows, the sounds of the city reach him. He hears buses groan, trucks rumble, police whistle, taxis honk, pigeons coo, people say, "Hey, wait, yo, hello," and children laugh. Gus smiles. He steps into the spot where Ida liked to soak in the sun. He listens to their city pulsing around him. He remembers that Ida said, "You don't have to see it to feel it." The sidewalks tap and the streets hum. Gus's heart beats. And Ida is right there, always. The end. And then there's an author's note here, so I'll read that to you. Ida Always is a fictional story inspired by the real pair of polar bears, Ida and Gus, who lived together in New York City's Central Park Zoo. The two bears swam, played, and cuddled together for many years. They were visited by more than 20 million people from all over the world and deeply cared for by their zookeepers. By the time Ida came ill and died in 2011, she had created many wonderful memories for friends to remember her by. And when Gus died 2 years later, friends cherished their many memories of him too. While I was working on this story, I visited Gus. He sat on a large rock surrounded by the city skyline with his head tilted toward the sun. Like other loved ones who have passed away, Gus and Ida will be with me always. That's from the author. So many themes present in this book, but mostly I like how, one, they used animals, and animals help children to be able to cope with loss. And I like that it's based off of a true story. Here, I'm in Ohio, we have the Columbus Zoo, and over the years we've also had animals die, and those become big news in our community, especially some of the older ones who had been in the zoo for a very long time and were very popular for guests to visit, as well as some of the zookeepers there to care for and tend for. So I like that that aspect was brought up in here as well. But I like how they talked about kind of some of their normal routine with them together, and then faded into some, reference of illness or something being wrong. And so for children, sometimes they will experience that with a loss, say if there's a diagnosis of cancer or something like that, whether it's a sibling, a parent, a grandparent, a friend, or someone else in their family. They may experience like a knowing, anticipatory grief, and they may know that somebody may be dying, and then to then experience that loss and know that that person or that animal is not there anymore, and some of those feelings that they go through when they're alone and their person isn't there with them anymore, and some of the feelings that they may have. And so it talked about at the end of the book some of the things that Gus did with the zookeeper, some of the things he did on his own to remember Ida, but just in remembering the things that he did with Ida, remembering that Ida was there always, no matter what. Even though she couldn't physically be there anymore, her memory was still up here, and in everything that he did around him and that he heard and listened to and experienced all day. So I hope that you enjoyed Ida Always today, and you can use this in your practice with your students or with your children at home if you're experiencing or they're experiencing a loss and maybe need some help coping with that. Thank you for joining me today for Therapy Book Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.